The year was 1914. The world was on the brink of war. But for one man, the real battle would be fought in a place far colder, far harsher, and far more unforgiving than any battlefield: Antarctica. This is the story of Sir Ernest Shackleton and the men who faced impossible odds when their ship, the Endurance, was swallowed by the ice. Ernest Shackleton was not a man who settled for ordinary life. Born in Ireland, raised in England, he had already made his name in earlier Antarctic expeditions. But in 1914, he dreamed bigger than ever before: to be the first to cross the Antarctic continent from sea to sea, on foot. 27 men, handpicked for courage and skill, joined him on the expedition. They set sail on the sturdy wooden ship Endurance, named for the very quality they would soon need more than anything. At first, spirits were high. The men sang sea shanties, played with the dogs they had brought for sledging, and looked forward to the adventure ahead. But the closer they sailed toward Antarctica, the more nature began to change. The sea became colder. Sheets of floating ice appeared. And then, the ice became a wall. By January 1915, just a few days from their intended landing point, disaster struck. The Endurance became trapped in a solid sheet of ice. No matter how the crew tried to free her, the ice refused to let go. Shackleton made the decision to turn the ship into a winter camp. The men would wait for the ice to thaw. But the Antarctic does not give mercy easily. Weeks turned to months. Temperatures plunged to minus 20 degrees Celsius. The sun disappeared for months at a time. And still, the Endurance sat frozen, unable to move. They hunted seals and penguins for food, told stories at night, and did their best to ignore the groaning sound of ice pressing harder and harder against the ship's hull. Then, in October 1915, it happened. The ice began to squeeze with unstoppable force. Massive blocks of frozen water pressed inward like a giant's hand. The hull of Endurance shuddered, bent, and then splintered apart. Shackleton gave the order: abandon ship. The men scrambled to save what they could: food, lifeboats, and supplies. Their home, their shelter, their connection to the outside world, sank beneath the ice. Now they were stranded in the middle of Antarctica, with no ship, no radio, and no hope of rescue. Shackleton's plan was simple: get to solid land. But simple in Antarctica meant dragging heavy lifeboats over jagged ice for hundreds of miles. The men faced blizzards, frostbite, and exhaustion. The ice shifted beneath them, creating dangerous cracks. At night they huddled in tents, eating meager rations of seal meat and ship's biscuits. Days blurred together. Their world was endless white. Every horizon looked the same. But Shackleton refused to let morale collapse. He told jokes, kept up routines, and made sure no man was left behind. After months on the ice, they finally reached open water. Shackleton ordered the lifeboats launched, and the men sailed for the nearest scrap of land they could find: Elephant Island. It was a miserable place: rocky, windswept, and utterly remote. No ship routes passed nearby. They might as well have been on another planet. But on Elephant Island, they had one thing they hadn't had for over a year: solid ground beneath their feet. Still, Shackleton knew they couldn't survive there long. The only hope was to reach a whaling station on South Georgia Island, more than 800 miles away, across the most dangerous seas in the world. On April 24th, 1916, Shackleton and 5 men set out in a single lifeboat, the James Caird. It was barely 22 feet long, and they would sail it across the South Atlantic's freezing, storm-ravaged waters. For 2 weeks, they battled monstrous waves, freezing spray, and the constant threat of capsizing. Their clothes were soaked, their hands numb, and the cold gnawed at their bones. They navigated by the stars when they could see them, which was rare. Finally, battered but alive, they sighted South Georgia Island. But the journey wasn't over. The whaling station was on the opposite side, and the seas around the island were too dangerous to sail. Shackleton, Worsley, and Crean decided to attempt the impossible: cross the island's uncharted mountains and glaciers on foot. They climbed icy slopes with no ropes, descended sheer drops with only makeshift lines, and walked for 36 hours straight without rest. Their only guide was the sound of the whaling station's steam whistle, faint in the distance. When they finally stumbled into the station, ragged and frostbitten, the workers were stunned. No one had ever crossed the island before, let alone in such a state. Shackleton wasted no time. He organized a rescue mission for the men left behind on Elephant Island. It took 4 attempts. Ice and weather turned him back again and again, but Shackleton never gave up. On August 30th, 1916, after nearly 2 years since they first set sail, every single man of the Endurance expedition was rescued. Not one life was lost. Shackleton's expedition never reached the South Pole. They never crossed Antarctica. But what they achieved was far greater, a story of courage, leadership, and the unbreakable will to survive. In the face of the coldest, harshest place on Earth, they endured.